Okay, right then. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. And this is our last support group of the academic year this morning. So we've decided to do a session on unlocking a love for reading. I think for a lot of dyslexic learners, reading is one of those things that they tend to avoid or dread. So we're going to talk a bit about that and maybe why some of those reasons are and what we can do to support that and maybe encourage reading a little bit more. My name's Samantha Buttle and I'm the Head of Teaching and Learning at Dyslexia Sparks. I've been with the charity since we started and I've had a real push this year on encouraging reading in our centre when we launched our book reading project earlier this year, which has been really exciting. So we've had a really big focus on reading here at the centre this year. I think it's really important to think about what we're going to talk about today, and it's about making reading enjoyable and unlocking a love for reading. As I said before, for a lot of dyslexic learners, reading is not enjoyable, and we need to find out for each individual why that is and what we can do to support those areas specifically. I'm not going to go into this too much, but I think it's really important that we acknowledge what actually the definition of dyslexia is. So we've got where the word comes from. So the early definition is the difficulty with words and language from the dys and the lexis. But actually the more modern version is that it's a difficulty that affects skills involved in accurate and fluent word reading and spelling. So obviously we're focusing on the word reading aspect today, but it's those words, the accuracy and the fluency of reading, which is really important. Okay, we also focus a lot around school and exams and things on the speed of reading. Speed of reading is also important, especially if you're under timed conditions. But it's that accuracy and fluency that we need to be able to enjoy reading and to understand what we've read. If we sit reading words and we don't really understand it, we're probably not going to enjoy that aspect of reading quite so much. So we're going to think about reading habits and the reading habits of your children and why we need to understand those. So it's really important that we understand what they like, but also what they don't like. This is so that we can support any difficulties. And the biggest thing that I see, particularly through assessment, when I assess for dyslexia, is understanding the child's feelings around reading. So those are the sorts of things that I want to think about this morning. Why do we need to unlock a love for reading? So these are just a few of the comments that I tend to see or hear around reading when I ask children, students, assessments, what do you think of reading? How do you feel about it? And these are quite the most common responses that I get. Not always, I do get some students who really do love reading and who enjoy it. But these are some of the most common ones. So how they feel about reading. Lots of them say it's boring. Lots of them think it's too hard or that they can't do it. And some will say, I hate reading. I hate it. They dread it. They don't want to do it. They will do anything they can to avoid it. So when we have an understanding of a child's feelings towards reading, then we can start looking at ways to improve that and improve that relationship with reading. I think it's really important to discuss those things with your child, but also talk about their experiences with reading. If you speak to dyslexic adults and their experiences with reading, I will share some of mine. One of mine is when we used to read out loud in the class, everybody would read a certain amount. So it was either a page or a paragraph or, a certain amount of text. So as it was going around the class, what I would do is work out which bit of text was going to be mine. I would count the number of people, I would count the paragraphs or the pages, whatever I needed to count. And then I would start rehearsing silently that piece of text, that little bit that was going to be mine. And what happens then is that you're so focused on your piece of text, you're not taking in the information of the people around you that are already reading that text. And um, you're just focusing on your little section, your little bit. So you're getting no context of what's coming before your piece of reading. What happened to me was then one of those children either got taken out of the class or had to go to the toilet or something like that. So one of those children before me ended up being taken away, and my piece of reading was then changed. The fear that sank over me is unbelievable. So the panic, the anxiety of, oh my gosh, I haven't practiced this section. And then you're reading this part of the text where again you still haven't heard the piece before, you haven't practiced it, you don't know what some of the words are. So this wave of emotion washes over you, and this dread begins to build up. And that's just one example that I can think of off the top of my head. So when we talk about experiences of reading, are they good experiences or bad experiences, and how they make those children feel? And you can learn quite a lot about, what they're worried about. Are they worried about reading out loud? Are they worried about getting it wrong? Are they worried about missing words out? Something like that. And then you can really start to unpick why they don't enjoy reading, and hopefully put some supports in place to enable them to enjoy reading. And this is not an easy thing to do. This is not going to happen overnight. But there are lots of things you can start to do, and little steps that we can put together to start to unlock a love for reading. One of the first things that I would recommend to do is reading together. If you have very young children, this is probably something you will do quite often. And then children get to a certain age, and we sort of have this perception of that children don't like reading together or don't want to read together. But there's lots of benefits to continuing to read together as your children get older. The first one is that you can model reading. So you can show them how you read, you can show them expression, you can show them where to stop at punctuation, and give them an understanding of why those little symbols are there and the importance that they have in reading. You can share the workload. You can share the workload in just doing a section each. When children often talk about reading's very tiring for them, and you say, let's get out a book and we're going to read a whole chapter, it can be quite overwhelming when you look at how much text is maybe there, and especially if it's later in the day, or they've had a busy day and they already find it tiring to have a huge amount of text or a whole chapter to read can again set off some unwanted feelings and then sometimes behaviors, but it can give this sense of dread of I'm already tired, and I don't know how much of this I can get through. So maybe not putting a limit on that, and saying, right, we must read a chapter. If they're really enjoying it and getting through it, then great, keep reading until they've maybe had enough, or you start to see them getting tired and things. But sharing that workload where they can listen to you read for part of it, they can look at the text and see the words that you're reading aloud for them. And then they know that they've got a little bit to do as well, so they're joining, and it's something that you can do together. It can be really, really bonding and a nice time that you can have together. I understand that not every child is ready for this straight away, so there may be processes that you need to go through to build up to this. So I completely appreciate that. But that can start with guiding them and showing them books and talking about books and reading them together, and that comes from you reading to them. There's lots of comments around parents not reading to children and the impact that has, and there's evidence to support that. If your child is dyslexic, you could read to them every day, and it doesn't mean that they're not going to have their difficulties. So it's really important we acknowledge that they have reading difficulties if they're dyslexic. It's not, even if you've read to them every single day since they were born, they are going to still have elements of those difficulties. So this is not me saying you must read to them, otherwise they're not going to be able to read. You're guiding them and showing them a love for reading. And that listening to somebody else read and following a text is just as valuable as reading the words themselves. And that might be the key to starting to enjoy books, listening to books. And I hear often from families, and they will say, you know, my child is 10 or 11 or 12, and they love being read to, but they don't want to read themselves. So continue reading to them and let them enjoy those books and those stories for what they are, and you are guiding and modeling that behavior, that hopefully they will start to see the benefits of that. This is one that I'm a really big believer in, and I've had lots of comments about my own children's reading habits at school and things. But my sort of take on this is let them read whatever they want to read. Does it matter? So if your child's got a specific interest area, those are the sort of books that they will probably want to be looking at, and they are more likely to look at independently and work on. They may still have those reading difficulties and struggle with certain words, but again, you can be there to be a supportive hand for that and guide them through those words that they find more difficult. We have so many children who would never pick up a fiction text. They don't like stories, they don't like made up things. So give them a non-fiction. What is their areas of interest? What things do they enjoy? And let's get some books. Even if you look at those books together, they don't have to read every single word on the page. They can pick and choose what suits them. But you're investing time in enjoying books and enjoying reading. It doesn't have to be a book. It could be a magazine or a newspaper. It could be a recipe that they're reading. If they are reading, if they're already a reluctant reader, any reading that they do is a win. So going in through what their interests are is really, really important. It's interesting when we released our book project this year, we've got a vending machine with all sorts of amazing books in, and often children will go to a book that they're sort of guided to. So whether it be the front cover or the colours, or they recognise the author or the illustrations, it may have a picture of something on the front of it that they're interested in, often lots of animals and things like that. And sometimes those books are not age appropriate, in terms of they may look like they are for younger children if they are picture books, for example. So they have less words in them, but they're beautifully illustrated. And lots of parents I hear say, oh, don't get that one, that's a baby book. You don't need that one. And I would disagree a little bit. I think if they can pick up a book that they enjoy, the language may be simple in it, but they're developing their reading skills. So if they enjoy looking at the pictures and they enjoy the book and the content and all those kind of things, we then go back to the slide I said before about just being able to share that book and enjoy that together. They might be able to read every word of that book, but then that will give them some sense of achievement and pride in that. So that's really important for building confidence and self-esteem in a book, in reading, but in reading books. So it doesn't have to be a book. We are the students that I've got at the moment through our book project. We've talked a lot about the types of things they like to read, and we get a lot of children talking about children, young people, teenagers. We have talking about graphic novels. Graphic novels have seemed to have exploded in the last few years. So they do look more like what's on the screen now, with lots of pictures, look very cartoony. It's showing the sequence of events, but much less text, and that's because it's less overwhelming. My son has just finished his GCSEs in the last couple of weeks, and for his texts for his literature, he had Macbeth and Inspector Calls. I bought him the graphic novel versions of those because he was just more interested in them. So it got him reading, it got him looking at those quotes in those books that he was so very needing to learn for his GCSEs. But it was that want to do it. So whatever works for your child, I think let them go with it, and support that and guide them through the different options that are there. As part of our book project this year, we did do a Dyslexia Sparks blog. So this is just on our website, and this was sort of put together through our own experiences as dyslexic specialist teachers, but also through our students, what sort of things they like, what sort of things do they like to read, what sort of books do they like, why they like them. So there's lots to choose from on there. So if you do get a chance to have a look, if you're stuck for ideas, have a little look at that blog on there. There's some images. I think what I found when buying books for the book project is I like to have a look inside them. So when you go to certain websites, it will just show you a page of it. And it's really interesting to look at how the text's laid out, and what does that look like inside? Is there pictures in there? And a lot of the children are really keen to know that as well. So if you're buying books with your children, obviously there's loads of great bookshops or places that you can find books, but if you are buying them online, just have a look as well on the pictures to see if you can have a look at inside it. Some children are really just put off by when they open a page and it's full to the brim of text. It's instantly overwhelming. So having these pockets of text that are maybe broken up by pictures, or just spread out a little bit differently, can really make a big difference. This is something I really support. I often talk about dyslexic learners and homework, and I think reading is the same. Is planning in a special time to do it, and you're setting those expectations with your child, particularly young children. But you're setting those that expectation of what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. Particularly very reluctant readers. So if you know a good time for your child, I'm thinking more about when they're at school. If a good time's in the morning, before they go to school, great. If that's the worst time of day and it's absolutely chaos in your house, like a lot of houses before the school run, do you set aside a few minutes after school? Do you do it before bed? And you make a special time of that's when you're going to share books together. And then you both know, you and your child know, that's going to be the time that you're going to spend some time together reading. I think it's proven that little and often is better. So reading for a few minutes every day, even if you start off with 5 minutes a day, is better than sitting down at the end of the week and trying to do an hour's worth of reading. If you've got a reluctant reader and you're saying we're going to do this for an hour, it's probably not going to be an enjoyable experience for either of you. And I do completely appreciate that as a parent. So planning in a special time. If you've got more children, you might want to make it a special time, just a one-on-one time, which I know is difficult when you've got multiple children as well, but that can make it quite a nice special time just for the two of you. So whether it's going through that shared reading where you read a little bit each, you're reading to them, and that can just make the time enjoyable for you both. You might want to do it in a special place. So there's lots of research around early years of reading and how they like to read. So lots of children like to sit in dens because they feel safe and they feel cozy and comfortable, and they like to be in these sort of environments. And that's why reading before bed can be quite a special time when they get comfy, they get ready for bed. The only problem with that is that some children can be very tired at that time. So that might not be an appropriate time for your child. So thinking about what's best for them. My children used to read better in the morning before they went to school. We had a set routine every day where, we'd do all the things, getting up, getting dressed, breakfast, all those kind of things. And then we would have 5 minutes each. But we did that every day. So over the course of the week, that time built up to a substantial chunk of time to start reading. So it could be encouraging that special time, but making it expected and say this is the time we're going to spend together reading, and maybe making a special space or having a special cushion, a special chair, something like that where you sit together can make a real big difference as well. I think the whole thing around reading is it being calm and enjoyable, which for a lot of dyslexic children, reading is not. On the flip side of that, I think you can read anywhere. I think you can do reading anywhere. And this goes back to it doesn't have to be a book. I've got some book heavy pictures on here, but I don't believe it has to be a book. You can read anywhere. If you go out for lunch, can they read some words on the menu? If you are out shopping, can they look at road signs, shop signs? I think when you take the pressure off that we are sitting down and we are reading and we're going to read this book today, that can be a lot of pressure before you've even started. So to just do it while you're walking around and thinking about things, shops with lots of things, supermarkets and things are great for that. Can you find something beginning with A, and they can go off and find it and maybe try and read what that word or that product is. I do think you can introduce reading anywhere. And this focus does not have to be on sitting down and having a book if that is not what is suitable for your children. And even if you're lucky and you're going on holiday on an aeroplane, can you read the instructions together, the safety instructions? There's lots of imagery and things to go with that to support the words, which is a great way of doing it together. If you do go and stay somewhere in a hotel or something, is there something in the room that you can have a look at together? And just making it a normal everyday process of reading rather than producing a big huge book where we think we're going to read this novel today. So some of these things are just starting with really little steps, and then when they're doing that, and then you can point that out. Oh, you read that really well. How did you know it was that word? How did you break that word down? There's all these things then that you can start talking about around reading and acknowledging they can read and they can do things. When I said right at the beginning, those are the lots of the comments that I hear is I can't do it and it's too hard. So you can show them just as you're walking around how they can read and the different words they can access. Reading does need to be enjoyable and fun, and this for some dyslexic learners it really isn't. And I as a busy working mum know the pressures of we've got everything to do in the day, and then we've got homework to do and reading books to do, and we've got to get so many in a week and things like that is really difficult. So sometimes when there's a reluctance to read or it's difficult or we haven't got the time to do that can be really hard. So the summer holidays is maybe for some families a little bit easier where you're not so restricted for time and you don't have quite so many time pressures. So in terms of enjoying books in particular, you can get lots of books with no words in it. So you can show them an enjoyment of books where they can make up their own stories. You can give them a book with just pictures in, they can do that. They don't have to read the words. But if we're starting with enjoyment of books, just look at some pictures together and talk about the story, talk about what's happening. Graphic novels and comics are great for that anyway, because there's so much going on those pictures that you can pick out, and maybe your child can make their own story up. It doesn't have to be guided by the words that are in there. If you've got a very creative young person, they might like to act things out. They might like to use silly voices. They might like you to use silly voices as well, to show that it is fun and it is enjoyable and it can be done together. And they can be silly with it as well. It doesn't have to be sitting down rigid with a book and making sure we get every word right. It's about that enjoyment of doing it and seeing what we can get out of those stories that we are putting together. Technology, I know, can be difficult for some parents, and there's lots of pros and cons to using technology at any time, but there are lots of pros to using it for reading if you have a reluctant reader. So Kindles and those sort of reading devices, the reason there's lots of positives to them, obviously the negative is the amount of screen time, and I, as a parent, understand that as well. But in terms of reading on a device like that, there are lots of positives. So how it's presented, you can change the font, you can change the size of the font, you can change the colour of the background, you can change the line spacing. So just how it looks on the page instantly can make a big difference to how they perceive this book, this story that they are then reading. The good thing about some reading devices are, if they are trying to read more independently, there are functions on there where it can read a given word to them. So if there's one word that they can't read, but they are doing really well with the rest of the sentence, they can click on the word and it'll tell them. And some of them also give a definition if they're unsure what that word means. So the positives of technology is that it can bring some independence to them as they are getting older, or if they just want to do it on their own. So I appreciate the cons to using technology, but if we're talking about encouraging reading, there are lots of positives towards using those sort of technology items as well. Is it accessible? So when I speak to a lot of the children who I assess in particular, when they come for tuition, I see them weekly and we talk a lot about what sort of books and things they like and how we can support reading. But usually if I see them for an assessment, it might be the only time I get to meet those young people. Um, and when they talk about it's hard and it's tiring and things like that, it's about thinking about what's appropriate in terms of their ability. So when you're reading together, obviously you can support them, and with some, some technologies, there's some level of support there as well. So how accessible the book is really can be quite key. And again, it depends what you're doing with it. If you're looking at the pictures and making up your own story, the text itself wouldn't really matter. There will be words in there that they can probably pick out and identify. But if we're talking about independence of reading, and reading for enjoyment independently, we need to look at the accessibility of the texts that they're looking at. So obviously there's lots around reading age appropriateness, but also their interests as well. So what sometimes happens is when as children get older, if they've got reading difficulties, they are probably more likely to be able to access a book which is perceived as a lower age for them. So then that can impact the presentation of the book, so how it looks on the front cover, but inside as well, and how their friends or brothers or sisters, cousins, family will perceive that book that they're picking up as well. So when I mentioned before about the parents saying, oh, it's a baby book, that can instantly put children off reading because they don't feel it's appropriate. They don't feel it's appropriate for them, but it's the level that they can access. So this book that I've put on the screen here, this is a dyslexia friendly book, and it's published by Barrington Stoke, and they are a publishing house who really focus on dyslexia friendly books. So this book in particular it's got an interest age of a teenager. So it's on the back, and when you look on the website, it has an interest age. And then that obviously impacts how it's presented on the front cover and things and the topics that it's about. Next to that, it will have a reading age. So the reading age can be lower than the interest age. So I think this book has a reading age of 6 to 7, and the interest age is 11 to 12. So when they're sat next to their peers or their siblings or the cousins or aunties and uncles, and they pull this book out, it looks like a book that they should be reading for their age, but it's accessible to them and they can read independently and access lots of the words in that. So that to me is really important. If you give somebody a book where they're starting with every other word, trying to break those down, it's tiring, it's frustrating, it's not fluent. And if it's not fluent, they're not going to be able to understand it. So then they're just reading words for the sake of it, and they're not enjoying that process of the storytelling that's in there for them. So this is our rule of 5, and this is how we would gauge a book for a young person. So you just open a book in the middle, usually somewhere in the middle, and that's usually a good gauge of the text that's in there. And you just ask your child to have a little look through it and put a finger up for every word that they don't know or they cannot read independently. So on here, so if it was one word, if they knew all the words apart from one, that book's pretty easy for them. So if you're at the point where you're really just starting off with encouraging reading, that's okay. You know, if they can read every word of it, we're talking about building confidence and experience and enjoyment. But in terms of that reading complexity, that is too easy for them. If you read a page and there's maybe 2 words that you're finding difficult, or made a mistake with, that's about the right level for them. We want it to be a challenge to some degree, because that's how we push them on and learn, and how they learn about breaking words down and things like that. But that's okay and that's acceptable, and hopefully it wouldn't create too much frustration for them. If you get into 3 words, 3 and 4 words, that's starting to become a bit more of a challenge, and that impacts those things that I just mentioned, that fluency. And when your fluency is impacted, it's going back and understanding what you've read. So they may need to go back and reread that then, and then that becomes tiring and a bit more of a heavier process than just trying to enjoy the book that is in front of them. If you end up with all 5 fingers up, that book is probably too hard for them to read on their own. However, that might be a nice book for you to read together and share together using that guided support or turn taking, things like that. So it's a sort of simple way to think, is this book going to be accessible for them? It's great when kids pick up a book and they say, oh, I'd love to try this, and they open it and then they're put off before they've even started. So they're not going to enjoy that. They're not going to love reading that book because it is going to be a bit of a chore for them if they're trying to do it on their own. My favourite subject around reading is audiobooks. It is not cheating. I tell my students all the time, it is not cheating. There are so many positives to listening to audiobooks. I stopped reading for a long, long time and then started getting into audiobooks, and I absolutely love stories again. And I've read or listened to hundreds of books in the last few years now, whereas before I hadn't touched a book in a really long time. Not for reading for enjoyment, only through studying and work and those kind of things. So audiobooks can really open a brand new world to you. Another sort of extended positive is if you can read and listen to a book at the same time. So just like a parent reading to a child, if you've got an audio book and you've got the physical book or the text in front of you and you can listen and follow it, that is going to continue to develop those reading skills, and you can look at those words. It helps with word recognition. It helps with you identifying, again, that punctuation within reading, where you can see the importance of those punctuation marks and what they actually do for you. It can really encourage a love for stories. So once you've listened to a story, if it's something you enjoy, something you like, a topic you enjoy, and you've come enthralled in it, it might encourage this love for stories, which might just open the door to picking up a book, maybe in a similar genre or a similar series. So this might be a stepping stone for those really reluctant readers to make a start at opening the doors to stories and things again. The other benefits of listening to books, there are lots, and there's lots of evidence to support through research to support the importance of audiobooks, the same as being read to. So, for example, it gives you that punctuation side that I've just mentioned. It improves your vocabulary. It improves your knowledge and understanding of sentence structures and things like that. So the more you listen to those books and those stories, it's improving all those other things around it, which will in turn continue to improve your reading, but also have an impact on your writing in terms of content. Different types of audiobooks that are available. There's probably more than this, but these are the ones that I talk about. Obviously, there's Audible, which is a huge brand. It is subscription based. So for some people, maybe not appropriate financially, but they have hundreds, thousands, possibly millions of books. I don't know. There is so much to choose from with using Audible. We have worked closely with a charity called Listening Books in the last couple of years, and they provide free audiobooks for anyone with a disability or a difficulty accessing reading in what would be a traditional way. So sat there holding a book, they and reading it, they can offer. So they support people with physical difficulties who can't physically hold a book. But also, if you have a diagnosis of dyslexia, you can make an application to them with your dyslexia diagnosis, and they will provide free audiobooks to you to listen and to enjoy stories. And then the third place, which is a growing section, is your local libraries. The library services in Hull, I know, have increased their selection of audio books and accessibility to audio books, which is really exciting. So if you don't live in Hull and you live somewhere else, have a look at your local library and see if they have audiobooks there that you can access, and again, that's for free as well. So there are lots of different options in terms of getting to those. The one I haven't put on here is some books now, children's books, have a QR code in them. So you buy the book and there's a QR code in it, and if you scan it, once you've bought the book, you then get the audio version for free. So when I mentioned about listening to the book and reading the words at the same time, there are lots of books now that provide those QR codes and make up an audio book and a physical book in one, which again is quite exciting. I've also just popped on here some other supportive technologies that are available to support reading. So I mentioned a Kindle, or there's other tablets as well that that you can support reading on, and the benefits of those. So the physical look of it on the page, the size, the font, the spacing, the colour. So that can be really important for some learners, some young children. The other two supportive technologies that we use, that we recommend, and that we would that we support our students with is, so the first one is called Orcam. That's this middle picture here of the little girl who has her snake around her neck, and this is a really impressive piece of technology, which basically what happens is it takes a photograph of the text and it will read it to you. There's other aspects that you can use within this. So it's got another setting which is called Reading Pal, and you can take a photo of the text and then you can read the text to the pen, and it will then give you a readout of how well you've done. It will support you, and it will let you know, if there was any particular words that you found difficult and things like that. So very high tech. It's very good for long pieces of text, or bigger chunks of text, rather than, it does read individual words, it does, and it does it really well. But I think that the beauty of what that piece of technology is for longer pieces of text. The bottom photograph, there is one of our students using a reading pen, a scanning pen. This again, you can scan whole chunks of text with this one. However, I feel personally it's better for those people who don't need that level of support and maybe just need it for the odd word, especially if it's a keyword. So you often get children who can read okay, and then there's maybe one word in the sentence, but it's the key one they need to understand the context of what they've read. So if it's just that odd word that they struggle to break down, a reading pen, a scanning pen, can be a really useful piece of technology. They are accepted in exams, both the Orcam and the reading pen, if that's your child's normal way of working. There are aspects of that maybe need changing. So for the Orcam, you have to turn it offline if you go into an exam, and there's a process that would need to be followed, that your school or your college would go through for the exam board to adhere to that. With the scanning pen, with the reading pen, this version, this white version that you can see on the screen, it has other functions. So it's got like a dictate recording section on it, and it's got a dictionary on it, so you can look words up if you're not sure what they mean after you've scanned them. So there is an exam version of that. So it's completely different. It's a different colour. It's bright orange. But again, those are acceptable in exams and things like that, apart from your Year 6 SATs reading exam. Because it's a reading exam, you're not allowed that in there. But other exams, GCSEs, things like that, those two technologies are accepted. I will just add, they don't work for everybody in terms of usage and what they gain from them, but they are there to sort of have a look at and possibly try if you think that's right for your child. Just a couple of other things to think about to enjoy reading. and developing those reading skills, particularly while they're off school. We don't want them to feel like they've left one school to come to another school when they're at home. We want them to enjoy reading, and we want to do it in a supportive way. But one of those ways that you can support reading is to think about rhyme and how well developed their rhyming skills are. So this can be done, through songs, rhyming games, nursery rhymes, singing, sort of more traditional. We're not necessarily sat down with a book, is what I mean. We're not, but it does help your reading skills because it teaches them about sound. So when you're talking about words and you're listening for those sounds, that impacts your phonological awareness, which is one of the deficits that we usually see in a dyslexic profile. It also helps them experience rhythm of language, and then that can help with the development of expression. So obviously expression in reading as we go along can be quite important. But listening to that rhythm, syllables in words, and those rhyming words are all really valuable skills to support reading. It also helps you predict words. So when you listen to part of a song or a book that's rhyming, a poem, they could predict what the next word is. So again, it's not sitting down with a book necessarily, but it's thinking about how those words go together and the patterns that they can hear. And it also helps them recognize those patterns both for reading and spelling. So when they can hear that rhyme in those words, and it can add to the fun, it can add to the fun of reading as well. But can be done in lots of different ways. Like I said, there's songs and word games and things. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but this is just something that comes up quite often with our learners. By vision difficulties, I do not mean that they may need glasses. Obviously, that is something that is important to check with our children anyway each year. I'm talking about visual stress. So visual stress is not the same as dyslexia. They are two very separate difficulties. However, there are a large proportion of dyslexic people who also have visual stress. So if your child sees a text like this, or they may complain of words moving or jumping or jumbling on a page, some children see sort of haloing, so it's got like a little bit like this, or some children see more prominent spaces, so the spaces sort of come to the forefront and the words go backwards, which can cause blurring. That's not their vision itself. These are visual difficulties such as visual stress. The way we would look after somebody with visual stress is that often coloured overlays can help with that. That will not improve their reading in terms of being dyslexic, but it can support how that looks on the page. So if they are jumbling words out or missing lines, that's really common if they can't track along and they miss the lines, that may be some visual difficulties there with visual stress that they've got. So when I talked about Kindles being able to change the background colour, that would be supporting somebody with visual stress. It's not a support for dyslexia. It may help. The clearer they can see those words, that we would hope to see that there would be an improvement, but they are two very different and separate difficulties. But those are the sorts of things we would look for when going then to explore visual stress further. So it would be things like missing words, them talking about words moving, and it's really hard to ask children that without putting words in their mouth. If you say, do the words move on the page? They'll probably go, yeah. There's young children. So it's, thinking about what do they see? How does that look? if they read a lot of visually similar words, so where there's lots of the same letters and the words are the same shape, that can be visual stress. That can be down to dyslexia as well, but those are the sort of things that I would look for when supporting. And again, that can really make a big difference to how children perceive a book or any text that they want to read. If they see it looking like this, they may not want to do it, but they probably assume everybody sees it in the same way because they don't know any different. So the reasons around encouraging reading and supporting reading is usually that those children who have reading difficulties through dyslexia, they don't sort of just come on at a later date. If you are dyslexic and you have difficulties reading when you're young, that will persist as you get older unless we continue to support and develop those skills. So it is really important that we try to find what works for each child to unlock this love for reading, whatever that may be that they are reading. The earlier that those difficulties are identified means the earlier that we can put the right support in place. So we're not saying that those with dyslexia will never learn to read. I am dyslexic, I can read, and I can read accurately. What I struggle and what evidence shows is it's often the speed of reading that is impacted. But this is like any other skill. The more you practice it, the better you will become at it. So when we talk about children playing sport or anything like that, we encourage, if they want to get better, we encourage them. And reading is just the same. It's a skill that needs support and nurturing, and looking at what those individual needs are. I realise I'm going to run over it, but I just wanted to bring these things up just to support reading, and this will help with the unlocking of love for reading because it will help with the fluency. I'm not suggesting this is something that you try and do at home over the summer, but these are the different ways that we can encourage and improve reading. So the first one would be to support those phonological skills, the way we sound words out, but also to look at the visual recognition of certain words as well. So by decoding skills, I literally do mean how we break words down into their sounds. The difficulty that dyslexic learners have, lots of them can identify the correct sounds in words, particularly after a certain age, if they've been taught phonics and that. But the difficulty comes with them blending it, which is still part of that phonological awareness. So blending lots of sounds. So if you've got a word with 5 sounds in it, you've got to remember all those 5 sounds in the right order. If then you are dyslexic, you've probably got difficulties with working memory. So you're trying to hold that information in your head and then you're trying to put all those sounds together. And that can be really difficult. You might miss a sound out, you might add extra sounds in, or you might confuse the order. So it's not the identification of sound, it's the process that you're using once you've got those sounds that you've identified. So this is something that we would work on in our lessons. So rather than having a word like stamp, which has got 5 letters, so you're trying to remember the st, you've got that order to remember, all those different sounds. What we would do is look at chunking those sounds together. So if they should recognise the st sound, and then amp is in lots of different words, but we're putting all that together. That's all one chunk of sound. So within that word, the word stamp, we've gone from 5 different sounds and blending those to 2 chunks of sound, which are easier to remember, and then hopefully then therefore easier to pop together, to blend together, which will improve that reading and the accuracy of that reading as well. The other thing to just think about is sight words. So words that they will see often. We see in lots of texts. We will probably use more or less daily in school. If we can make these words automatic, so they recognise them automatically, that can have a really big impact on your reading fluency and your accuracy. So it's thinking about how we can support those kind of things. Can we do them in the form of matching games? Can we give visual reminders? Could you stick them on post-its all around the house and ask them to go find it and make it into a game? Again, it's about making these things fun and exciting and taking away the pressure of sitting down and reading, but improving the knowledge of these, the visual recognition of some words, those common words, can really make a big difference. The last thing that I just wanted to mention in this webinar today is our Sparks Reading Challenge. We do not focus on amounts of reading. We really focus on little and often. So we've put together a really simple little challenge for our students, for assessment students, anybody who would like to take part. And we've got some nice reading related prizes for these things that people can take part in. It's about reading in different ways, sharing and enjoying books in different ways, books, stories, texts, whatever you want to call them, whatever they want to read. On the back page of it, there is a little book log. And again, this is not to put any pressure on thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to read 10 books before the end of the summer. That I am actually collecting for my next round of books that I'm hoping to buy for our book project. So I want to know what books they enjoy, maybe what they don't enjoy as well, so I can avoid those ones. But it's finding out what they would like from us. And again, this is available on our website under our summer reading challenge. And that's everything from me. Our telephone number and email is available on there. Our charity is closed for the summer for 4 weeks, and we will be back late into August, early into September. So if you have any questions or anything, please drop us a call or leave us an email. But I'm just going to stop my recording now. Thank you so much for everything today.